Chapter 21. You are listening at novelful.audio. After just a few days of training, Tian started to get frustrated. It wasn't that he wasn't progressing, but the martial arts moves were too intense. Even though there were only 9 forms, each one packed a punch, shaking the air. His place was too small, and he was constantly worried about breaking something. Time to move, he decided. This place is on the edge of the base. If a wild beast breaks through, we'd be the first ones hit. Too dangerous. I'm not worried about myself, but my sister hasn't even started training. She's defenseless. And I'll be heading out into the wilderness a lot. I won't always be here to protect her. We need to move to that villa area in the center of the base. The villa area was super safe. Short of the entire base falling, they'd be untouchable. But those villas were crazy expensive, 10 million yuan for even a small one. Out of reach for regular folks, Tian still had over 2 million yuan saved up. Plus, being a martial artist, he could get a loan from the base bank. That should be enough to snag a small villa. At lunch, Tian brought it up with Yu. Xiaoyu, I'm thinking of moving to the villa area in the center of the base. I checked it out. Central Garden looks like a good neighborhood. Yu's eyes went wide. She reached out and touched Tian's forehead. Bro, you feeling okay? A small villa in Central Garden is like 10 million minimum. That's way out of our league. Where'd you learn that, kiddo? Tian lightly flicked her forehead. Your brother's loaded now. He slapped 2 gold cards on the table. 2 million right there. Plus, your brother's a martial artist now. I can get a loan. Tian puffed out his chest, beaming. Wait, brother, you're a warrior now. Yu gasped, covering her mouth, totally shocked. She knew he'd only been training for like 6 months. To become a martial artist that fast was insane. Yeah, just broke through. But keep it on the down low, okay? Your brother's a total genius, and we don't want to attract the wrong kind of attention. Tian said quickly. Okay. I promise. Yu nodded eagerly, her eyes sparkling with pride. She was so proud to have such an amazing brother. Over the next few days, Tian took care of the paperwork. These days, buying property was simple. No need for deeds or anything. Just sign a contract. The villas all came furnished, but Tian thought the furnishings were pretty basic, more like old-fashioned courtyard style than the modern villas he'd imagined. Maybe the big bases could do modern villas, but this coastal base didn't have the resources, mostly because it cost too much. The one good thing was the size of the place. A 50 square meter courtyard with 5 rooms, 2 living rooms, and 2 bathrooms. The entire villa was 400 square meters. And that was considered a small villa in the coastal base. Since land wasn't an issue. When they built the base, they made it huge. Only a few 100,000 people lived there. It was sparsely populated. Once the villa was his, Tian started moving. They didn't have much stuff. In half a day, he and his sister had officially moved into their new home in Central Garden. Still, the villa wasn't really his. If Tian failed or couldn't keep up with the payments, the bank would take it back, so Tian was determined to pay off that loan ASAP. But 8 million yuan was no joke. Even for a martial artist, earning that kind of money would take time. For an average martial artist, it could take 10 years, even decades. Tian figured he wouldn't need that long. The rate he was hunting beasts, he'd clear that debt in no time. For the next couple of weeks, Tian headed out into the wild every day, hunting beasts. He targeted smaller ones, hauling them back to the base right away. He was bagging one a day, worth about 200,000 yuan each. In just 2 weeks, he'd raked in 3 million. That kind of crazy hunting was something no other martial artist would dare to do, not because they lacked strength, but because it was too risky. Who could guarantee they'd come back alive every time? Most martial artists played it safe. If they ran into a powerful beast, escaping would be tough, but Yi Tian was fast. Even at the early stage of the martial artist level, his speed rivaled someone in the late stages. Plus, he had that shadow talent. That's what gave him the guts to hunt so aggressively. After his beast hunting spree, Yi Tian decided to take a break. He stayed at the base, focusing on his training and building up his strength. Another couple of weeks flew by, with plenty of beast blood to fuel him. Combined with his advanced training talent, Yi Tian had gotten a lot stronger. He could already lift 2,000 caddies, and his skin had become super tough, able to block regular steel weapons. In old world terms, he could practically stop bullets. Too bad there weren't any bullets anymore. One day, Yi Tian went back to the black market, not to sell, but to buy. He headed to Wu Pavilion. "I want to buy a map of Death Lake," Yi Tian announced. Death Lake was a lake located 10 kilometers from the coastal base, and it was surrounded by wild beasts. It was called Death Lake because it was full of terrifying aquatic beasts. Even elite warriors had a hard time surviving there. The reason Yi Tian wanted to go to Death Lake was because of a particular raw water beast, the lighthouse jellyfish. Before the Genki era, lighthouse jellyfish were tiny sea creatures. But with the arrival of the Genki era, they had mutated. They no longer lived only in the ocean, and they weren't as sensitive to the environment. Their survival rate had skyrocketed. You could say the lighthouse jellyfish was an earth creature, not some fierce beast from the spatial cracks. But they were still super strong. They'd grown to the size of a human hand, and they were incredibly hard to kill. Even a warrior struggled to put one down. Their tentacles could pierce right through a warrior's body. Rumor had it that even elite warriors would run for their lives if they saw a swarm of lighthouse jellyfish, or they'd be goners. Yi Tian was after the jellyfish's unique ability. He was convinced they had a healing and recovery talent. If he could copy that, his chances of survival would jump up several notches. Going to Death Lake was a gamble, but the potential payoff was worth it. Chapter 22. You are listening at novelfull.audio. We've got everything from 10,000 to 100,000 maps of Death Lake. Which one are you looking for, warrior? The clerk asked. All business. What's the difference? Yi Tian inquired. The 10,000 maps are pretty basic, just the general layout. But the 100,000 map. That's the deluxe edition. Super detailed. It even includes intel on the types of monsters in the lake and their weaknesses, the clerk explained. Give me the 100,000 map, then. Yi Tian decided 100,000 was pocket change. Besides, knowing more about Death Lake could help him avoid some nasty surprises. After handing over the cash, Yi Tian grabbed the map and picked up some healing supplies. His Qingyuan liquid was top-shelf stuff, and he'd already cracked open one of the 3 bottles. No need to restock that particular brand, but he could definitely use some stuff for scrapes and bruises. No point in wasting the good stuff on boo-boos. With his shopping done, Yi Tian told Yi Yu he was heading out of the seaside base. 10 kilometers was no joke. Yi Tian was careful, and it still took him half a day to reach Death Lake. Boom. He heard fighting not far off. Someone's here. Yi Tian was surprised. Death Lake was a dangerous spot, way out in the sticks. Even elite warriors didn't usually bother hunting this far from the base. What was someone doing out here? Play it safe, Yi Tian muttered. Warriors might play nice in the seaside base, but out here in the wild, it was every man for himself. People would kill for resources. He moved slowly, trying not to make a sound, heading toward the lake. Death Lake had a weird layout. Mountains all around it, with a huge lake in the middle. But the mountains weren't really mountains, more like hills. For Yi Tian, the only good thing was all the trees and shadows on the hillsides. Perfect for using his shadow power to stay hidden. Soon, he saw a group of figures. He hung back in the darkness, watching. It's her. Yi Tian recognized Yuling from the martial pavilion. She and her crew were duking it out with some monsters near the lake. It was a real brawl. Giant croc beasts. Yi Tian said, spotting the monsters. These things were 10 meters long, mid-level beasts. And their leader was a 20-meter monster, so big it shook the ground when it moved, high level, for sure. Tian was positive that the croc leader was a high-level beast, about as tough as a grand martial artist. Someone, an old guy, was holding his own against it, so he had to be at grand martial artist level himself. 10 elite martial artists and a grand martial artist, and they're kind of surrounding Yuling like they're guarding her. Weird. What's a crew like that doing in Death Lake? Maybe they're looking for something she needs. Tian wondered. He stayed put, keeping an eye on things. Suddenly, a guy burst out of the lake. He was walking on the water like it was solid ground, and his clothes were bone dry. Water gift, maybe. Tian guessed that kind of power would be pretty handy in the water, but Tian wasn't interested in copying it. He was after that lighthouse jellyfish power. Miss, it's here. Let's go. The guy shouted, sounding panicked. He zipped over to the shore and practically shoved something into Yuling's hands. He was moving too fast for Tian to see what it was, but it had to be something big, probably the reason they were even here. Then, disaster struck, the lake exploded, and a giant croc came roaring out. It was like some ancient dragon croc, and the pressure coming off it was enough to make the air feel thick. Holy crap, what did they stir up? That thing's gotta be higher than a high-level beast. Tian said, terrified. Now he got it, the other big croc wasn't the leader. It was just a squad leader. This new croc was the real boss. Miss, it's a top-level beast. We'll hold it off. You get out of here. The old man yelled, his face pale. Let's go. Yuling ordered, gritting her teeth. Too late. The old man said, full of dread. They hadn't expected this. This was supposed to be a backwater, not home to a top-level beast, the kind of monster that only a grandmaster could handle. He was just a grand martial artist. With the other water-walking guy, they only had 2 grand martial artists. They couldn't stand a chance against that thing. Boom. One of the elite martial artists charged the top-level beast, going for a suicide attack. The old man shoved Yuling away and formed a last-ditch barrier with the water guy. Yuling knew she couldn't save them. She had to get out, or they'd all die here, but the other crocs weren't about to let her escape. They came after her, and she ran for her life. Fast, strong. Yuling's got to be a peak elite martial artist. She'd wipe the floor with me in a heartbeat. Tian figured, but even she couldn't take on that many crocs. Her guards couldn't hold off the top-level beast long enough to buy her much time. Yuling was desperate. Boom. Suddenly, she unleashed a grand martial artist's power. She was using some kind of forbidden technique to boost her strength. It was just temporary. When the spell wore off, she'd be weak as a kitten. Then she'd be dead meat. Die. Thought she skewered one croc through the head with her sword, kicked another one away. She was a force to be reckoned with, but there were too many of them. Before long, she was knocked flying and hurt bad. She ran, and they chased. Soon, she was bleeding bad and the number of chasing crocs had thinned out. She didn't know how far she'd run, but there were no more crocs behind her. But she was seriously messed up. Then, her face changed. Oh, crap. The spell's wearing off. That she was doomed. She was in the wilderness, nowhere near safety. When the spell wore off, she'd be helpless. Any random monster could finish her off. Before she could think of anything, she went limp and fell to the ground. As she faded out, she thought she saw a figure appear next to her. Chapter 23. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I'm not dead. Yuling woke slowly from her coma, doubt clouding her thoughts. Given what had happened, she should be, yet, she was still conscious, meaning she'd been rescued. Could any of my guards have survived? She wondered aloud. She quickly dismissed the idea. Against those beasts, there was no way they could have made it. Opening her eyes, she noticed the darkness, but her senses told her someone was nearby. You're awake. A young voice spoke, though she couldn't see his face. Yuling recognized him. Tian, you saved me. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Yeah, I saw you fall and brought you to this little cave. Tian said. Thank you for saving me. Yu Ling said, grateful. It was nothing, just a coincidence. Tian smiled. He'd considered leaving her, even taking her valuables, but that felt wrong. Besides, Yu Ling seemed decent, as evidenced by her refusal to join the martial pavilion without a fuss. Someone like Imo Xiaobei. He wouldn't just leave him, he'd probably kick him while he was down. Suddenly, a soft light emanated from Yu Ling's hand, a stone, glowing like a light bulb, illuminating the cave. Whoa! Tian was surprised. He'd carried Yu Ling all the way here and hadn't noticed it. He felt like he would've. It's a light stone, stores light. They're rare, even in big bases only a few people have them, Yu Ling explained. She wasn't worried about Tian wanting it. It was rare, but not particularly valuable. She wouldn't mind giving him one if he asked. Yu Ling placed the stone on a rock, and a bottle of healing potion appeared in her hand. Downing the potion in one gulp, she waited for it to take effect. Whoa! Tian was certain she just produced that bottle out of nowhere. That meant she must have a storage device on her. Plus, her healing potion was top shelf, way better than his Qingyuan liquid. He'd even given her some of his Qingyuan liquid when she was unconscious, but it only helped a little. Yu Ling's potion was healing her skin injuries right before his eyes. Sensing Tian's gaze, Yu Ling smiled. You haven't seen a storage bag? They're made from space kangaroo pouches, refined by martial artists with space abilities. Any martial artist can use them. Space kangaroo? Tian asked, curious. Yu Ling explained that they were high-level, powerful, intelligent beasts, hard to hunt. Their pouches had spatial properties, allowing them to store things. Once hunted, a space kangaroo's pouch could be refined into a storage bag. Of course, anything with spatial properties could be used, but space kangaroo pouches were the most practical and easiest to find. I see now. Tian thought to himself. No wonder he didn't know. He was just from a small base like Linhai. He couldn't compare to someone like Yu Ling. For the next 2 days, Tian stayed with Yu Ling. She was still recovering, and he didn't want to leave her alone while he looked for the lighthouse jellyfish. It was a slight delay, but he gained knowledge. For example, the realm beyond Great Warrior. At Linhai Base, Great Warriors were the strongest. There were only 1 or 2 openly, and maybe a few more hidden. But in big bases, they were only mid-level. The realm above was called Grandmaster. A Grandmaster could wipe the floor with a group of Great Warriors, and they lived much longer, up to 200 years. Tian was stunned. He immediately had a new goal, reaching Grandmaster level. Too bad it was so difficult. Even those with advanced talents had less than a 10% chance, and only those with top talents had a decent shot. Tian, I'm going back to the big base, Yu Ling said when she was almost healed. Then stay safe. Tian replied. Before leaving, Yu Ling tossed him a package. I think you could use these. Before he could refuse, she was gone. Tian smiled. He opened the package to find a cheat book, 10 bottles of beast blood, and 10 gold cards. Whoa, the intermediate yuan force forging body method, 10 bottles of high-grade beast blood, and 10 gold cards. That's 10 million yuan. This is way too much. Tian was taken aback. The intermediate yuan force forging body method was the most valuable. He wasn't sure if even the big families in Linhai had it, but regular martial artists couldn't get their hands on it no matter how much they paid. The intermediate yuan force forging body method, plus 10 bottles of high-grade beast blood. I'm sure I can reach elite martial artist level in 3 months. Tian felt confident. He'd planned to head straight for the Lake of Death, but now he'd wait until he was an elite martial artist. It would be safer. Besides, now wasn't a good time to go anyway. Yu Ling and the others had stirred things up at the lake, and the beasts were probably on high alert. Going now would be suicide. 3 months should be enough time for things to calm down, so, Tian decided to head back to Linhai Base. Chapter 24. You are listening at novelfull.audio. No problems on the trip. Tian made it back to the Linhai Base safe and sound. The next day, he hit up the black market and dropped nearly 10 million yuan on a pile of mid-grade beast blood. He could easily have paid off his loan with that kind of money, but he decided the beast blood was the better investment. Even though he had 10 bottles of high-grade beast blood, burning through that stuff all the time would be unsustainable. The best approach was to mix it up, using the high-grade stuff occasionally while relying on the mid-grade blood for most of his training. Back at his villa, in the little yard, Tian got straight to work, practicing the intermediate yuan force forging body method. It only had 9 movements, but each one was way more complex and powerful than the beginner version. As he moved through the sequence, an incredible surge of yuan qi flooded into his body, refining him at a rate that blew the low-level method out of the water. 3 times faster than the basic method. Tian was stunned, and that was just a dry run. Throw in the beast blood, and the gains would be even greater. The intermediate method was just that much better at extracting the benefits. Time to test this high-grade stuff. He didn't hesitate, taking a swig, boom, starred out a monstrous wave of energy ripped through him, feeling like his body was about to be torn apart. Definitely underestimated that. Tian realized he'd screwed up. He immediately threw himself into the intermediate yuan force forging method, working through the movements again and again until he finally managed to absorb the high-level blood's energy. Thank goodness for the intermediate method. Otherwise, there's no way I could have handled that blood. Yuling must have known this, which is why she gave me both the blood and the technique at the same time. He mused. He did some quick calculations and figured the high-grade blood was boosting his cultivation speed 6-fold right now. Add in the intermediate yuan force forging body method, and that jumped to 18 times faster, and that was before you factored in his high-level cultivation talent, which was already 3 times better than a mid-level talent. So, compared to the average medium talent genius here at Lin Hai, I'm cultivating 54 times faster. Tian couldn't help but grin. Of course, those other geniuses would also be using mid-grade beast blood to boost their training by a factor of 2 or 3. Even then, he was still 20 times faster. 1 month of his training was equal to nearly 2 years for them. Too bad I only have 10 bottles of that high-grade blood, Tian thought, already feeling greedy. With plenty of resources and no interruptions, Tian trained with everything he had. 3 months flew by. Finally hit the elite martial artist level, Tian exclaimed, thrilled. His skin, muscles, and bones had been tempered to a whole new level, and his strength had shattered the 10,000 caddy barrier. He was officially an elite martial artist, though still just a beginner. To truly master the level, he needed to refine his blood. Elite martial arts was all about blood refinement, removing impurities and concentrating what was left. It was a demanding process that burned through a lot of blood. Without enough nutrition, you'd literally run out of blood and die. The best way to replenish blood was, naturally, with more blood, specifically, beast blood. This whole process required a ton of it. High grade was better, but Tian had already drained his supply. Even if he hadn't, he probably still wouldn't have enough. Beast blood was always in short supply at the Lin Hai base, even though there weren't that many martial artists to begin with. The elite guys hoarded 90% of it, consuming obscene amounts every day. In those 3 months, he also hadn't wasted his talent copying opportunity. He'd secretly copied a few medium cultivation talents and fused them into his own, hoping to push his high-level talent to the next stage. No luck so far, but he could feel he was close. Maybe one high cultivation talent would be enough to break through to the top level. After another 3 days, Tian had finally started to refine his blood and stepped into the early stages of elite martial arts. Now boasting 13,000 caddies of strength, he was ready to return to the Lake of Death. He was determined to get his hands on the lighthouse jellyfish's talent. Coming to the Lake of Death once more, Tian felt a knot of nervousness in his stomach. He was definitely stronger than he had been 3 months ago. His swordsmanship had advanced to the minor accomplishment level, and his shadow-killing technique was near perfect. But still, he didn't dare underestimate the dangers of this place. Top-tier beasts lurked here, and one wrong move could be his last. It was evening when he arrived. Instead of plunging in, Tian waited patiently for nightfall. The darkness would provide the perfect cover for his shadow talent. It might not fool high-level beasts with spiritual power, but it would definitely hide him from the weaker ones. Moving at night was just safer. As darkness fell, the lake of death transformed into something eerie and menacing. The air was thick with the stench of fierce beasts, enough to scare away even the bravest souls. Tian steeled himself and waded into the water. Shadow talent, that he instantly melded with the darkness, gliding silently beneath the surface. As an elite warrior, he could hold his breath for a full hour. He had to find that lighthouse jellyfish within that time, or he'd have to surface, and risk everything. It's really pitch black down here, but thankfully I have the copy talent, otherwise, I never would have found this thing. Tian thought grimly. Sure enough, thanks to his copy talent, he soon sensed his first aquatic beast, species, tiger clawfish, bloodline talent, medium. Chapter 25. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The tiger claw fish was just a mid-level beast, nothing special. Tian ignored it and kept searching for those lighthouse jellyfish. With his copying ability, no aquatic creature could hide. Now that he was an elite martial artist, his detection range had increased from 10 feet to 30 feet. Within that range, he could detect the talent of anything living. Time trickled by. Tian sensed plenty of aquatic beasts. The scariest moment was when he picked up a high-level one. Luckily, he spotted it from 30 feet away, and it wasn't using its own power to scout around, so Tian managed to slip away in time. About a half hour later, jackpot. Tian finally located a small group of lighthouse jellyfish, species, lighthouse jellyfish, bloodline talent, basic, healing talent, epic. Seriously? An epic healing talent? Tian was blown away. He'd figured the lighthouse jellyfish's talent would be average at best. Never expected it to be top tier. He'd never even encountered a top-level talent before, and here it was, on a jellyfish. Time to copy. I gotta copy this. Tian thought, fired up. Lighthouse jellyfish weren't particularly strong and wouldn't notice Tian right away. He slowly crept closer to one of them. The instant his hand brushed against a jellyfish, he snagged its top-tier healing ability. He backed off immediately, not wanting to stir up the whole group. One jellyfish wasn't a threat, but a swarm of them. No thanks. This was the lake of death, after all. He didn't want to trigger a feeding frenzy among the local wildlife, even if he could vanish with his shadow talent. Soon, Tian was out of the lake and standing on solid ground, finally able to breathe easy. Gotta get out of here. He bolted away from the lake of death and sprinted back to the small cave he'd been using as a base. Once inside, Tian started the process of fusing with the epic healing talent. Boom! The transformation was incredible. If you could zoom in on Tian's cells, you'd see them changing at the deepest level, each one evolving in a major way. The pain was worse than anything he'd felt before, but Tian was stoked. It was a good kind of hurt. After what felt like forever, Tian finally felt like $1,000,000. He stood up and checked out his stats. Human, Tian, cultivation talent, high, speed talent, basic, blade talent, average, shadow talent, basic, healing talent, epic. Time to test drive this healing talent. Tian pulled out his knife and slashed his arm. Then, something incredible happened. In less than a second, the wound was gone. Whoa! Tian gasped. The effect of the epic healing talent was insane. With a power like that, unless he took a truly fatal hit, he was practically unkillable. His survival odds had just skyrocketed. Still, Tian wasn't about to think he was invincible. No matter how powerful the healing, it still used energy. If he ran out of juice, it wouldn't work. If he ever faced an enemy he couldn't beat, all it would do is buy him a little more time before the inevitable. Strength was still the name of the game. After crashing in the cave for the night, Tian headed back to the Linhai base first thing in the morning. For the next couple of weeks, Tian went on a beast hunting spree. He also splurged on a new Yuanli pickup truck, the latest model, which set him back a cool $1,000,000. With the truck, he could haul more kills back each day, and his income went through the roof. Plus, with the healing talent, it was almost impossible for a mid-level beast to take him out, and high-level beasts weren't exactly lining up to fight him. Tian paid off his loan in 2 weeks, squirreled away $5,000,000, and stocked up on tons of mid-level beast blood. Now that he had the resources, Tian was ready to focus on training and getting stronger. For elite martial artists, training meant refining their blood. Their bodies had to be in top shape, too. The Yuan Force body forging technique naturally improved his physique while he worked on his blood, so the two went hand in hand. At over 10,000 pounds of strength, he was considered a beginner elite martial artist. The limit for an elite martial artist was 100,000 pounds. Tian was still shy of 20,000, so he had a ways to go before reaching his peak. But, with his numerous talents, he could already hold his own against elite martial artists who had 50,000 pounds of strength, and could escape an elite peak martial artist with his life. Still, he wanted more. Tian wanted to be able to go toe-to-toe with peak elite martial artists, maybe even compete with great martial artists. Too bad his talents were mostly support-oriented. He didn't have any true offensive abilities. Next time, I'm definitely copying an attack talent. Tian decided. The martial artists at the coastal base weren't doing it for him. He was setting his sights on beasts. There were way more talented beasts than martial artists. Once he locked onto a certain type of beast, it wouldn't be hard to find. Beat searching for a needle in a haystack among humans. Of course, a beast with an attack talent would be way more dangerous than others. If he wanted to copy its power, he'd need to be strong, so, for the next 2 weeks, Tian trained like a madman. With his epic healing talent, he didn't have to worry about pushing his body too hard. His training speed went through the roof in just half a month. After burning through a mountain of mid-level beast blood, Tian boosted his strength to 30,000 pounds. That was an achievement that even high-level cultivation geniuses couldn't manage in months. On this particular day, Tian was flipping through his newly bought, relatively complete beast atlas, looking for a worthy target. Mighty bear, mid-level beast, twice as strong as normal, suspected to have a strength talent. Tian shook his head. The mighty bear might have a strength talent, but it wouldn't be anything special. Maybe a second-rate talent at best. Not what he was looking for. Flame bird, mid-level beast, has a flame talent, can easily incinerate a regular mid-level beast. Tian shook his head again after reading that. The flame bird's flame talent wasn't that impressive. Probably just a basic one. It would make him stronger, but not by much. It wouldn't help him compete with the elite peak martial artists. Whoa, now this is interesting. Tian locked onto a beast in the book, a look of surprise on his face. Chapter 26. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Divine power ants, huh? Tian leaned in, really checking out the details on these divine power ants. Okay, so they're technically low-level fierce beasts, but don't sleep on them. They're seriously nasty. They're as strong as mid-level beasts, and they roll deep, like, thousands deep. Even a great warrior would get swarmed and taken down. These ants have gotta have an insane strength talent. I knew ants were tough from my past life. Divine power ants are fierce beasts, so it's gotta be amplified. And it's a talent, which means if I copy it, my combat abilities will spike instantly. Tian was getting hyped, but he wasn't dumb. He knew how dangerous these things could be. A whole army of fierce beasts is bad news, especially with a special talent. If their bloodline talent didn't hold them back, these ants would be the stuff of nightmares. There are no divine power ants hanging around the Linhai base, or we'd be toast. If I want to copy their ability, I gotta go way out there. And that's a big risk, Tian muttered, brow furrowed. Then it hit him, he didn't have to find a live colony. If he got his hands on a complete corpse, he could still grab the strength talent. Time to check out the black market, specifically, Takakaka's shop. They sell everything, including fierce beast parts. Usually, it's just the meat, but maybe they'd have a whole corpse. Probably not, since divine power ants aren't exactly easy to bag. Tian was just hoping for a lucky break. Running around solo trying to find these things was a recipe for disaster. The same female clerk greeted Tian. Warrior, what can I get for you? She asked, super friendly. I'm looking for a complete divine power ant corpse. Think you guys might have one? Yi Tian asked. Divine ants, she looked surprised. Nobody ever sells them. Warriors usually run when they see them. I'll check. She hurried off. A few minutes later, she returned, looking apologetic. Sorry, warrior, we're fresh out of divine power ants. Yi Tian looked bummed, but he expected it. Okay, got any leads on where I could find one? Or maybe you could put out a request for a corpse. I'm willing to pay top dollar. Just then, another guy came over. I'm Chen He, deacon here. I hear you're looking for a divine power ant corpse. That's right. Chen He smiled. I might have some information you'd be interested in. Oh. Spill it. If it gets me a corpse, I'm all ears. The Linhai base is about to open up trade routes with a mid-sized base. They're about 100 kilometers apart, and there's a divine ant nest right smack in the middle. Both bases are sending warriors to clear out the fierce beasts along the way. The mid-sized base is taking point, but the reward is solid. You join up, and nabbing an ant corpse would be easy. Open up trade routes. Yi Tian was taken aback. In this world, fierce beasts rule the roost. Humans just try to survive in their territory. For two bases to go clearing out the beasts was audacious. Were they crazy? What if they riled up something nasty? They must have thought about that. It's probably a pretty quiet area, not much going on. That's the only way they'd have the guts to try this, Yi Tian thought. Then he remembered the Lake of Death. That place had apex predators all over the place. If they tried to clear that out, they'd get wrecked. I'm in, Yi Tian said. He had a simple plan. It didn't matter if the bases succeeded or failed. He would get in there, figure out where the divine power ants were, and maybe borrow their talent. Here's a token. Head over to the Lin family in 3 days. They'll assign you a task, Chen He said, tossing Yi Tian the token and walking off. The Wu Pavilion is involved. That's why he's being so helpful. Yi Tian knew this mission was dicey. Even with the mid-sized base leading the charge, the Linhai base was still weak. A lot of warriors might die, but he wasn't gonna be one of them. He was pretty good at surviving. If he got his hands on that divine power and talent, he could go toe-to-toe with a great warrior. 3 days flew by. Yi Tian showed up at the Lin family compound. The Lins were the top dogs in the Linhai base. The Mo family was nowhere near their level. Before he became a warrior, Yi Tian thought the Lins just had one great warrior. Now, he knew the truth. 5 great warriors, one of whom was at the top of his game, with a strength of 900,000 caddies. He could obliterate other great warriors without breaking a sweat. With that guy at the helm, no other family would dare challenge them. Yi Tian arrived and saw a bunch of warriors hanging around, at least 100. Some were pretty good, but he didn't see any great warriors. Hey, I see some familiar faces. Yi Tian was surprised. Chapter 27. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The only people Yi Tian recognized were members of the Wind Wolf hunting squad. Ironically, he'd gotten his initial speed talent from a silver moon marten they'd hunted. In a way, he owed them a debt. That speed boost had been crucial early on. Without it, Shadow Li Cun might have finished him off. This time around. Yi Tian thought, if I can help the Wind Wolf hunting squad, I will. Yi Tian knew them, but they didn't recognize him. He'd changed a lot. His temperament, hardened by training and constant fighting, now carried a killer's edge. It made him look older. Even though he was only 16, he could easily pass for 18 or 19, a far cry from how he looked before. Plus, he'd shot up in height from around 5 feet 7 inches to almost 5 feet 11 inches, and bulked up considerably. The Wind Wolf crew had only seen him in passing when he was just a low-level martial artist. Why would they remember some nobody? He was long forgotten. Instead of staring at them, Yi Tian stood alone in a corner, patiently waiting for whoever was in charge to show up. A few people wanted to connect with him. He was so young to have reached this level. He had to be incredibly talented with a bright future. If they only knew he was already an elite martial artist, they'd be shocked. Unless you're a great martial artist yourself, it's tough to gauge someone else's strength. You can only really tell in a fight, or by sensing their energy. And Tian was deliberately suppressing his aura. How could these elite martial artists possibly know what he was? It wasn't that he didn't want to reveal his elite status, but now wasn't the right time. Once he'd copied the divine power and strength and talent, then he could show his cards without holding back. He kept those warriors at arm's length. Lin Mingji's here. A buzz went through the crowd. Lin Mingji, The name triggered a flood of information. Lin Mingji was the son of the Lin family head, still in his 30s, but already a peak elite martial artist, close to becoming a great martial artist himself. With his average talent, he was qualified to advance, but he was unlikely to get beyond the early stages. Even so, an early-stage great martial artist could run things in the coastal base. Besides the Lin family's top dog, all the other great martial artists were only in the early stages. Tian guessed that the Lin family's peak martial artist probably had a high-level talent, but failed to break through to the grandmaster level. And that guy was getting old. It was unlikely he'd ever make the jump now. Alright, settle down. A martial artist with heavy eyebrows and big eyes, Lin Mingji, called out from nearby. Everyone here is willing to help clear out the beasts, right? This plan is going to have huge benefits for our coastal base. It's too small as it is, resources are limited. If we can open up a trade route with a medium-sized base, we can buy treasures we've never seen before. That's why this is so important. Of course, there's danger involved, but the rewards will be worth it. I guarantee that anything you find on this trip is yours to keep. And if you can't carry out the monsters you kill, the Lin family will send half of them to you afterwards. Naturally, our family has also prepared gifts. Standard martial artists get 20 vials of mid-level fierce beast blood and 2 million yuan. Elite martial artists get 3 high-grade blood vials and 10 million yuan. Lin Mingji's words sent the crowd into a frenzy, extra rewards on top of everything else. It was too good to be true. Nobody complained about getting only half the leftovers. A lot of the monster corpses were too huge to carry anyway and ended up going to waste. The Lin family offering to haul them back and split the profits? That was more than fair. Tian shook his head at the excited warriors. They were way too optimistic. The reward was tempting, sure, but they had to survive to collect it. If they died, they got nothing, and the Lin family wouldn't lose a thing. Basically, Tian thought, they're getting free labor and a chance to rake in resources. The Lin family is playing this perfectly. With almost 200 warriors here, plus the ones from the major families, I bet they'll have at least 1,000 on this mission. He calculated, that was a good chunk of the base's total fighting force. Lin Mingji had someone bring out a strength testing pillar, some kind of yuan force device that displayed your power when you hit it. Definitely imported from another base. Each martial artist went up to test their strength, and then they were grouped according to their level. Tian kept a low profile, intentionally underperforming to the level of a late-stage martial artist. Even that caused a stir, with everyone marveling at his strength and talent. Even Lin Mingji tried to recruit him, but Tian turned him down. Lin Mingji didn't push it. He probably figured Tian had average talent and wasn't worth the Lin family's time. After everyone had their strength tested, the grouping began. Elite martial artists together, standard martial artists together. Different groups would have different missions. The standard guys would just clear out low-level monsters, while the elite group would tackle the mid-level ones. Hey, Captain Wind Wolf, want to team up? Tian walked over to them. Each team needed 10 people, and the Wind Wolf hunting squad only had 8. Kid, you sure you want to team up with us? We only have one late-stage martial artist. You're so talented, you'd be better off with a squad full of strong guys. Wind Wolf hesitated. I trust Captain Wind Wolf. I think you're a stand-up guy with a good reputation. That's why I want to join you. But if you don't want me, no big deal, Tian said casually. Then welcome aboard. Wind Wolf grinned and extended his hand. Chapter 28. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Tian joined the Wind Wolf crew, another fighter joined up, bringing them to a solid 10. About a half hour later, they all lined up. Wind Wolf got the nod as team leader, which was fine by Tian. Our mission: clear out the local wildlife, Wind Wolf announced, pointing to a zone on a freshly delivered map. Tian checked it out. The area wasn't exactly next door to the Linhai base, more like 20 miles out. Hold on, Captain, that's a haul. We've never gone that far out before, one of the guys griped. Yeah, well, this cleanup covers 60+ miles, and I signed up knowing what I was getting into. The rest nodded, looking resigned. After a quick rundown of the plan, they geared up and headed out. Out here, things change fast, so they kept the strategy loose. Even though the ride was solid and could handle a lot of gear, it wasn't exactly nimble, and the rough terrain meant there were tons of spots where it just couldn't go. Bottom line, travel light and travel on foot. As they hiked, Tian thought, first, I'll knock out this job with Wind Wolf, then I'm hitting that ant colony and causing some chaos. Later, chatting with Wind Wolf, Tian learned his real name, Zhang Feng. Wind Wolf was just the team name that stuck. Wind Wolf wasn't exactly blessed with top-tier talent. His skills were basic, but he had pushed himself to the late stages of martial arts, which was a feat in itself. He might, at best, reach elite status one day, but that was a serious long shot. Tian, with his advanced talent, figured that an elite title wasn't impossible. But for Wind Wolf, it was like trying to scale a cliff. Still, there was a chance, even if it was only around 30%, and it meant burning through a ton of resources. That was why Wind Wolf signed up for this gig, hoping to make a decent score and maybe even bust through his limits in the process. Warriors sharpen their skills in battle. Sure, this mission was risky, but it was also a chance to grow. Wind Wolf, a lifelong fighter, wasn't about to let it slip by. Hey, Tian, you're barely 20 and already this far along, you've got serious talent. Why risk it on a tough mission like this? Training, Tian said. Short and sweet. Wind Wolf was impressed. You see, the hot-shot kids from the big Linhai families wouldn't dare step into the wild alone. When they did venture out, they were practically swimming in elite bodyguards. Tian, on the other hand, was a real warrior. Wind Wolf figured if he had talent like that, he might just play it safe, join a big company, and coast along with their support. That 20-mile hike dragged on. They didn't dare sprint through the wilderness, so it took most of the day to reach their target zone. Alright, folks, we're here to clear out the beasts, but if we run into anything too tough, we call for backup. Wind Wolf reminded them, calling in support was a team perk. Each leader carried a Yuanli communicator, but the range was limited to about 6 miles. The crew agreed. They knew they couldn't handle the big leagues on their own and would definitely need those elite fighters if things got hairy. Tian shook his head. He knew those assurances were just for show. With such a long patrol line, there were more beasts than fighters, so it was next to impossible to get help in time. Most of them knew this deep down, but you still had to hold on to that sliver of hope. Over there. 3 straw wolves, easy targets. Let's take them out. Wind Wolf pointed to some low-level beasts a few hundred yards away. Straw wolves were the bottom feeders of the low-level beast world. Even a greenhorn fighter could handle one solo. Soon enough, the team had wasted those wolves. They didn't bother hauling off the bodies. Straw wolves weren't exactly gold mines, and the whole carcass was only worth a few $100. Plus, they were calf-sized and a pain to carry, so they just left them. The search went on, and soon they had another target in sight. Hunt, scavenge, repeat. Things were going pretty smoothly at first. Not too many beasts, and nothing too powerful. That early success started to lull some of them into complacency, but Tian stayed sharp. This valley ahead is our main target zone. Everyone, stay on your toes, there could be some serious wildlife in there. Wind Wolf warned. Forests, valleys, and rivers were always the sketchiest spots in the wild, while open areas were the safest. As soon as they entered the valley, a beast came charging at them. It was a lizard, about 10 feet long, bright red, with spikes all over its back. A real ugly customer. What the heck is that thing? Someone asked, clearly stumped. Even Wind Wolf, who had seen his share of critters, looked clueless. There were just too many types of wild beasts out there. They only knew the ones near the Linhai base, and this one was a stranger, species, Charizard, bloodline talent, basic, fire talent, weak. Ye Tian saw the lizard's info and tensed up. Heads up, everyone. That's a fire-breathing lizard with fire powers. Yi Tian shouted. What? A fire lizard? Everyone went pale. Chapter 29. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The fire talent is special because it directly boosts combat power. For Wind Wolf and his crew, the scariest thing about hunting beasts in the wild is running into ones with special talents. These are only marginally more valuable than other beasts, but they're way more dangerous. Judging by its aura, this one's still a low-level beast. That's good. Wind Wolf muttered, trying to reassure himself. They all took a step back, looking anxious. Yi Tian, you know about these fire lizards, right? What's the deal with its flame talent? Wind Wolf asked. It's a basic flame talent, Yi Tian replied honestly. Basic, huh? So, its flame attack doubles its power. These lizards are dumb and fight predictably, so we can take it down. Early stage fighters, back off. This is above your pay grade. The weaker martial artists retreated as Wind Wolf instructed. They were too weak to contribute and would only get in the way. Whoosh, star, Wind Wolf took the initiative, testing the waters. Instead of breathing fire, the lizard snapped its jaws at Wind Wolf. Boom, star, Wind Wolf's blade collided with the lizard's teeth, sending it staggering back with a tooth flying. Yi Tian stood back, observing, and sizing up the lizard's strength. The lizard's got about 9,000 pounds of raw power. The flame attack is like 18,000 pounds of force. A martial artist's limit is 10,000 pounds, but adding yuan force, they can hit around 20,000. Wind Wolf's attack isn't quite that strong, but it's close enough to handle this lizard. Seeing Wind Wolf holding his own, Yi Tian decided to keep his real strength hidden for now. Roar! The lizard, enraged by the hit, finally unleashed its fire talent. Boom, star. A huge fireball appeared and shot toward Wind Wolf with incredible speed. Slash! Wind Wolf poured yuan force into his blade, creating a blade of pure energy that sliced toward the fireball. The energy blade cut right through the fireball and kept going, striking the fire lizard. Bang! The sword hit the lizard, wounding it again. At this point, Yi Tian and the mid-level martial artists joined in, launching their own attacks. It didn't take long before the fire lizard fell, defeated by their combined efforts. Ha! So much for special talents, one of the warriors said after the lizard was dead. Don't get cocky. There might be more than one of these in this valley, Yi Tian warned. Wind Wolf frowned at Yi Tian's words, the excitement of the hunt fading. Yi Tian's right. We just entered the valley and already found one of these. There could be a ton of them in here. Damn the Lin family. They sent us on this mission without scouting the area. They're practically using us to clear out a fire lizard nest. Wind Wolf grumbled, but he knew the Lin family wouldn't care about their complaints. They were here now. Turning back wasn't an option. Everyone, stay sharp, Wind Wolf warned, and they moved on. Soon, they encountered another fire lizard and killed it. After a brief fight. Shortly after that, two more lizards appeared. This time, Wind Wolf and his team were in for a real battle. They managed to kill the two lizards, but not without sustaining minor injuries, and they were only on the outskirts of the valley. It's obvious now. This whole valley is a fire lizard breeding ground. There are probably dozens of them in here. If we keep going, we're going to lose people. Wind Wolf said, exhausted. The repeated fights had drained his yuan force and stamina. His fighting ability was significantly reduced, and he couldn't take on a lizard by himself anymore. Continuing in this state was suicide. We fall back and regroup, Wind Wolf suggested. No one disagreed. They were all scared. The group turned to leave the valley, but as they approached the entrance, they found a dozen fire lizards blocking their way. Oh, crap. Wind Wolf was desperate. In their current state, they were struggling to take down a single lizard. Facing 10 of them meant certain death. Help! Wind Wolf pulled out his distress beacon and sent out a signal as they retreated, but even after sending multiple distress calls, they received no response. Damn it! There must be an elite squad within 10 kilometers, but those guys are ignoring my calls. Wind Wolf cursed. Captain, stop asking for help. No one's coming to save us, Tian said. Yeah, I know, but I was holding out hope. I guess I overestimated people. Wind Wolf sighed. The 10 fire lizards were closing in. In terms of speed, the fire lizards were only as fast as a mid-stage martial artist. Wind Wolf, being a late-stage martial artist, could probably escape, but if he ran, the others would have no chance. Most of the people here were his subordinates, guys he'd worked with for over a decade. He couldn't leave them behind. If Satsuki were here, with her archery, we might be able to hold them off and have a better chance, Wind Wolf thought, but he quickly dismissed the idea. Satsuki, from the Wind Wolf hunting team, was young but talented in archery. She was from a wealthy family and had a promising future. Her family would never let her participate in a dangerous mission like this. Besides, he didn't want to put Satsuki in danger. That's why he had refused her request to join them in the first place. Right now, she was probably safe at home. Snapping back to reality, Wind Wolf realized the lizards were getting closer and closer. He made a decision. I'll hold them off. You guys run. A determined aura emanated from Wind Wolf, inspiring everyone. Captain, let's fight them together. One of the warriors shouted. Yeah, let's fight. The others agreed. However, one newcomer to the squad, who didn't share their sense of camaraderie, saw an opportunity to escape. Guys, good luck with the lizards. Sorry about this, but he turned and ran back into the valley, hoping to find a place to hide. Coward. Someone yelled. Wind Wolf ignored the deserter and turned to Tian. Tian, you're talented. It'd be a shame for you to die here. You should run too. Tian smiled calmly. Don't worry. We're not going to die. They're just fire lizards. As he spoke, Tian released the aura of an elite martial artist. Chapter 30. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Elite warriors. Wind Wolf stared at Tian, stunned. He could hardly believe it. Becoming an elite martial artist was his lifelong ambition. But he knew just how hard it was, practically impossible with his basic cultivation talent. Even a genius with average talent needed resources and still wouldn't hit elite status until their 20s, minimum. But Tian? How old was he? And already an elite? He's gotta have advanced cultivation talent, Wind Wolf thought. That was on par with the Lin family founder. He was destined to become a grand martial artist, maybe even something beyond that. At the very least, he'd reach the peak and become the strongest in the coastal base. It was an honor to have someone like that on their team, to even call him a friend. Tian moved, his speed blurring. Wind Wolf could barely follow. In seconds, all 10 fire-breathing lizards lay dead, each taken down with a single strike. Mr. Tian, Wind Wolf said respectfully. Mr. Tian, the others echoed, bowing their heads. Elite martial artists were on a different level than regular martial artists. It wasn't just strength, their reaction time, speed, and overall yuan force were vastly superior. Even an elite with a physical strength of 10,001 gene was miles ahead of a regular martial artist with 9,999 gene. It was a whole different ballgame. Before, they'd seen Tian as just another martial artist, a peer they could call brother. But now that they knew he was an elite, they naturally kept their distance. Don't stand on ceremony, Tian said. Just call me Tian. But I'd appreciate it if you kept my elite status quiet for now. Then, with your permission, I'll call you by your name, Wind Wolf replied, smiling. Don't worry, we won't breathe a word. He understood why Tian wanted to keep it under wraps. He was probably worried about the big families in Linhai. They might try to butter him up and make him an offer, but some might be jealous and try to eliminate him. Even if there was only a slight chance of that happening, they'd have to take action. Once Tian came into his own, those families wouldn't be worth a damn. Just then, a scream echoed in the distance. That's Zhang Ben. Wind Wolf frowned. Zhang Ben was the one who'd run off earlier, and apparently, he'd run into more fire-breathing lizards. Wind Wolf wanted to help. They were a team, after all, and he was a fellow martial artist, but Tian stopped him. Wind Wolf, let him go. You guys won't spill the beans, but I can't say the same for him. Wind Wolf's face hardened. He glanced at the others, then fell silent, abandoning his rescue plan. The screams quickly faded, marking Zhang Ben's end. Let's move on, Wind Wolf, Tian said. Let's clear this valley of these things ASAP. Wind Wolf nodded. Without Tian, he wouldn't dare try clearing the valley. But with an elite martial artist by his side, it was a different story. One elite was enough to handle a pack of fire-breathing lizards. The group pressed on, soon finding Zhang Ben's body being devoured by several fire-breathing lizards. Tian casually took them out, and they kept moving. Along the way, whenever they ran into more than 2 fire-breathing lizards, Tian handled them solo. If it was just one, he let Wind Wolf and the others get some practice. This way, Tian led them deeper into the valley, and that's where they found a lot of fire-breathing lizards. Perched on a boulder, Tian scanned the area. He counted at least 30 lizards surrounding an even bigger one. That's... Tian's expression turned serious. He was too far to determine the big lizard's specific talent, but based on its size alone, easily over 3 meters bigger than the others, it was definitely a high-level beast. Probably mid-level, Tian guessed. He wouldn't sweat a regular mid-level beast, but one with an offensive talent. That was the king of the valley. We've got a problem. 30 fire-breathing lizards, and what looks like a mid-level beast. Tian laid it all out for Wind Wolf and the team. What? Wind Wolf exclaimed, shocked. A mid-level fire-breathing lizard would be incredibly powerful. Even an elite martial artist would have a hard time. Tian, let's get out of here. We can ditch the mission. Wind Wolf said through gritted teeth. He didn't want to give up after coming this far, but he knew how dangerous those mid-level lizards were. He didn't think Tian stood a chance. No matter how talented Tian was, he'd just become an elite. How could he take on a mid-level beast with fire talent? Wind Wolf, I'm not as weak as you think. Fire-breathing lizards have fire talent, and guess what? I have a special talent too. Tian revealed. You also have special talents. Wind Wolf looked at him, stunned. A martial artist with special talents was a whole different breed. An elite with a special talent could command the respect of even a grand martial artist. Nobody would mess with them. That's right. I have a basic speed talent. I can triple my speed, and my swordsmanship isn't bad either. Taking out that mid-level beast shouldn't be a problem. I'm going to try a decapitation strike. Stay back. Tian advised. He was confident he could kill the beast, but he couldn't guarantee the safety of Wind Wolf and the others. If they didn't listen, things could get messy. Tian will retreat far back. But be careful. If it gets too hot, just get out of there. Wind Wolf said. Got it. Tian nodded. Once Wind Wolf and his team were a safe distance away, Tian put his plan into action. Speed talent. He activated the triple speed boost and charged toward the group of fire-breathing lizards at an unbelievable pace. The leader, who was napping, woke up to the roars of its underlings. Its huge eyes locked onto Tian. It was going to crush this little pest who dared disturb its rest. Because that's all Tian was, in its eyes, a bug.